Yeah. So, welcome everyone to this session. We are actually having a session on recent trends and practice of landscape architecture. And to get today with us, we have architect Aditya Rao, all the way from Rotterdam. He is a landscape architect and an urban designer based in Rotterdam, and he currently works for a world-renowned landscape architecture firm of West 8 Urban Design and landscape architects who are responsible for projects such as Governor Island, New York City, and Borneo Sporenburg. Aditya is currently involved in Dutch urban land transformation projects in various scales and also participates in various international landscape design competitions. He studied his master's in landscape at TU Delft and bachelor's at the University School of Design at Mysore in architecture. Aditya is also an avid cyclist who tries visiting as many places on pedals and two wheels as possible. So, welcome, Aditya, and we're keen to hear you over the session. Yeah,
Thank you.
you can start your presentation
now. Okay. I'd like to thank Sapna ma'am, of course, first to invite me. It's very nice of her. And I'm hoping that this is going to be useful for some of the students who may be interested in landscape or in public spaces or in urban design even. It's a bit of a different field from what you study as architecture in India, let's say. And also it's not so widely practiced in India. There is an interest and there's a growing interest, but it's still quite young in India. I was told that the topic was somewhat kind of an introduction into the practices or the kind of work that is happening currently around the world. I focused on West 8 because it was easy for me in terms of understanding the projects and knowing what happened and how it came to be in a certain manner in terms of design, final output, and what the process was. Of course, I was not there for many of these. The firm started in 1987. So it's been around 30 some years, and so I think it's quite an old firm. So the images you see, many of them have been happening over the last 20 years, and some of them are new, some of them are more recent, and I focus on also, I'm sorry.
वो तो मैंने स्टॉप कर दिया है, लेकिन ये मैंने म्यूट किया फिर भी आते जा रहे हैं। वो मेरी मम्मी के कजिन का बेटा ना कहाँ पे पता नहीं कहाँ पे नीदरलैंड में कि फिनलैंड में कहीं आर्किटेक्चर पढ़ रहा है। अब उसको
maybe it needs to be muted. Yes. So there was yeah. So I was lost. I was hearing something else. The firm itself, being old, has had many projects before, and now I also try to show you more Dutch projects, which I can easily get the context of and try to understand what was happening when this process came about. This is who we are right now. Well, this photo is already 1 year old, 1.5. And I think already a lot of people have changed. Well, there's a lot of rotating interns. So many of these are not there, but we are around 70 people in Netherlands, and then we have 25 people in New York and a few people in Belgium. But it also, they move around a lot, and we try to keep it unified as one office by them coming here and us going there, depending on what projects you work on and what kind of collaborations are needed. There's a lot of Dutch. So the idea is we sell the Dutch design to other countries when we do this. Adrian Hauser, he is one of the main founders, or he's the main founder of West 8, with another man, Paul van Beek, who's not in the office with us. Adrian it's unbelievable to think of a character as crazy as him in a way, because let's say he revolutionized landscape design quite early on in the field, when the idea of landscape design was still horticultural in Europe. And the idea was just more to create a planting scheme and more to create like a nice little garden. At some point it became more. It became about understanding the engineering behind the space, and also bringing forward this Dutch thinking of design into the world. He teaches in a lot of places, won a lot of awards. He teaches in Harvard and Wageningen here in Netherlands. And he's also a researcher, and there's a lot that's based on him in this profession and in our firm. We're based in Rotterdam. It's a harbor city. It's known for the water. It's known for its huge port. It exports and trades. It's one of the biggest ports in Europe, and it trades all around the world. And it's very incredible, especially in this pictures. What's super interesting is this ship, for example. This is a temporary urbanism. This building comes, well, it's a ship, but it feels like a big building that comes and docks into the harbor, or the harbor is further ahead, but this port itself, this haven, and our office is right behind it. So you suddenly are blocked, and the river is blocked by this big ship. And it's very interesting to see this temporal urbanism, which only happens in Rotterdam. I actually live on this island, this little piece of land, and to the left, but it's a super beautiful city. And we've always been, the office has always been on the river from a long time, since they started. And the idea of West 8 comes from there's wind forces, and they're numbered W1, and in Netherlands, westerly winds are the most common ones. So, and 8 is supposedly one of the strongest, where you cannot really cycle or you cannot do anything. And so it's like the West 8 force of wind. And well, this is where we are right now in Rheinhaven, which is just behind this these buildings. There's a little haven, a little water body that's where there was an old factory where you would store goods which would come from India and other countries. And it's weird, but that's where we are now. The haven loads, it's called, where they would dock all these spices and would put and now it's become an architecture office with Indians working. The office does mostly urban design, landscape, and sometimes regional planning projects, and sometimes even architecture to a certain extent. And it blurs the lines between what is architecture, urban design. We are a team of different professions. There are around 10, 15 urban designers, 20 landscape architects, 30 architects, and furniture, let's say product designers and engineers. So we collaborate in making a place which is not just a garden, and landscape is more than that anyways. So this is one of the projects. But how I thought of presenting or kind of giving some information was more in terms of trying to understand how to read a project, because it's very difficult to read a landscape project. Many times I would ask myself, what does the landscape architect do in a picture that you see where there's a flashy building? Mostly there are flashy buildings which catch your eyes. So where do you see the landscape architect in this? And it's very difficult to read. So for those people to understand what it is and where it comes from, and what is landscape in this, for example, in this picture, I thought I will try to decode each design through what I know of the project from working there. And that makes it easier also to understand what is landscape architecture while learning about some projects. So in this picture, for example, we designed Rotterdam Central Station. When you say we designed Rotterdam Central Station, what does it mean? The building is, of course, catching the eye. It's this beautiful little shiny little metal thing with the poking out, and there's a lot of glass and very fancy. But what is the landscape in it? Well, you need to look at it from the perspective of people, but how do you see it in such a place? You see only this flashy building. You see a lot of people, you see a lot of activity, but where does it come from? To understand, you need to look at the kind of older pictures. So this was Rotterdam Central before 2008. This project was finished in 2008. Probably started maybe even when I was not even born, or just after that, like 95 or something like that, when the competition was first conceived. And when you get out of such a station, of course, here now you see a lot of, this is just when the construction had started. But even if this was green, when you get out of the station, the first thing you see is a tram line, and you see more stops. And there also used to be a bus stop here, this circle. So the buses would stop here. So when you get out of the city, your back is to the city, and you're not seeing anything. You're just seeing more transport. You're seeing more cars. You're seeing more roads. You're seeing more. You're not seeing the city when you arrive. And even, for example, Mysore. Let's put an example. If you would rethink of station, it's a very nice building, but when you get out of it, all you see is parking. All you see is pavement, and you don't see this skyline of the city. You get out of the gate, then you see somewhat, okay, there is the skyline of Mysore, a little bit of old buildings. You can see the playground, and the nice thing is you see the green and you see the playgrounds immediately in Mysore. But for example, here in this image, you could not. And this is what actually facilitates the beautiful architecture to be seen. Besides that being the point, that it's also to connect the city to the people. So what happens here? You move the tram lines to the side. You create this little kink. This is very important. This little shape makes a huge difference to how people perceive when you walk on this ground. Because when I get out of the station and walk through, of course, here in Netherlands, people follow rules. So when these stripe lines are there, the cars have to wait, and they usually do. But that also is being facilitated by this underpass that's being pushed through. So the heavy traffic goes underneath, and the cars that are only coming here are ones that really need to pass through and really need to go somewhere on a side exit or something like that. But honestly, there's very little reason to use this 3-meter road that goes through, and being pushed inside makes it more difficult, because you immediately first see the first stop, you see a tram line, the car cannot really pass through with ease. So the pedestrian is given importance. He's not disturbed by the car, and the car has to kind of slow down because of the shape of it. The cycle is also given width, as you can see. It's suddenly become wider, and it gives more volume to the cyclists. And that's always a contention between cyclists and pedestrians in Netherlands. So if you're crossing, you would have to look for the cyclist, because you wouldn't care too much about the pedestrian, which is not good. But pushing the tram here, pushing the parking, the metro is underneath the entry. The parking is below here. Cycling parking is actually below here. The metro is here. And also the bus station was moved to the left side. You cannot see it in this photo. The taxi parking was pushed over here behind this building. And when you get out of so this is how it was. When you get out of it, you immediately see the city. Okay, this is more an from a top perspective, but when you go to an eye level perspective, you really have an experience of, yeah, this is better. Still, still a top level perspective, but it's also, when you get out, you immediately see these towers, you see the strong line that goes through. And this design facilitated, let's say, also the continuation of this green into what the street is called Schouwburgplein. And when we design this, we don't just, of course, so what is our job? We make these kinks and we push the street underneath. That's a big thing. But there's also this tower. We don't build the tower, but we say it has to be positioned here. It has to be this height. We give a volume. And when we do that, we immediately create a space. Like you enclose it. There's also a tower on the side of, let's say, below here. So it's kind of on both sides. I think it's best seen here. Yeah, this was an old building. This is a tower let's say urban design suggested. So that's where urban design comes in, and that's where landscape comes in. So you kind of create this space. You say this has to be developed here, this much height, and this has to, and then you really have this access and continuity. So that's how it is like when you're entering the station. It really feels like this is a place to go. It's not a station inside a parking. And for example, in most Indian stations, the most stations around the world is now changing image to like this. The idea is that you have a compound wall and then you plop a building in it where there's a lot of things. But what if the station was instead out into the city? And that's what's happening in this design. And this leads to, when you go further on the street, it goes to Schouwburgplein, which is a famous canal street that used to exist in Rotterdam. It's called Singles, and this led to this project, as in it continued on to create a good promenade for this street. The trams continue along this green path, so below the trams can always be green, and still it's a nice lawn. And so there's a little bit more green added over there. The next project, so from what I'm trying to show is more like, how do you read the project? Because when you first saw this image, you first saw the architecture and you saw the building. And just by giving you this story, I'm trying to show you how let's say you read a landscape and you see that it is actually the things around it that is allowing this shiny building to stand out. Which, coming to the point, because our design is because our let's say our partners are very strong in their image. Even this is designed by Westate, even the shape of it. Finally, it goes to the architect to detail out, but we even say that, yeah, it should project out. And we did recently a competition in Czech Republic, where we also did a station, and it pretty much followed the same guidelines. So, I mean, we could innovate more. Now it's becoming, this one was a bit more standard, but at that point of time, it was quite revolutionary to open the station onto the city. So Schouwburgplein is also a very world-renowned plein in Rotterdam. It's very small. It's quite small. It's not very big. It's not like the one. Yeah, it's not like Trafalgar Square, or it's not a large size square. But design-wise, it was quite innovative. And when you see this, you see a square, you see a lot of people, but you don't understand. You see that, okay, this has to be done by a landscape architect, because there's no buildings really to give a clear idea of what it can be. But also you think that, oh, what's there? It's just a paving, and then there's some red lights and there's some ventilator shafts. But it's again about people. And yeah, this first is what activities it facilitates, but I have to explain it more based on what you see and what you don't see. So here you see a plane with a square with some forms of pavings. But the thing is, what you don't see is this paving was lifted up by 50 centimeters. You can see it kind of here. And below it are a huge amount of infrastructure and facilities where you can pull out a wire and make something out of it. So you can put up stage. So this is the material you have actually. It's grate, and you can pull out the grate and you can add some other material, and you can make it into suddenly a stage performance area. There can be, the electricity is running below this. Everything is running, water, electricity is running below. So you just have to pull out a wire, you add the stage, you remove some of the grates, put it on the side, you put this, and then it becomes a performance. It can also become green, which is, so you remove the, you don't even need to remove the grates. This is artificial, but you add a layer on it, artificial grass, synthetic, you plop a number of people in there, and it creates the idea of so much activity. And that's what happened. That's what's happening in Schouwburgplein. So the design was more than just a square with some lights on it. It was a reprogrammable, flexible surface. And at that point of time, it was quite revolutionary. So it also can change into a whole like little festival space for what may be Holi or something, it looks like. And then there can be a concert. There can be a fountain coming out of it at some points of time. So it really depends on the occasion. It's really programmable and flexible. This means it's more about the people and the activity that happens, and that's what Westate kind of is professionalized in. Here you see another activity, kind of some festival again. And then there's the story of these lights. Why and what is this strange light? So Adrian says it in this way. He says he wanted to design a light where he could put a coin into a machine and focus this light on his girlfriend and then wife. So just to kind of like make it a very romantic part, let's say. So you put in this coin, and you can rotate these big cranes to light it onto someone or something. And the idea came from the harbor, because Rotterdam is a harbor city. It's a rough, tough, blue-collared harbor city, and the cranes are the most. If you're cycling along the harbor, this is what you see. And I think that idea came into shape in this, and the coin slot no longer works. There used to be, so technology didn't keep up and maintenance didn't keep up, but it's fixed. It's fixed to one point. Sometimes it moves, but it's done by a maintenance guy. So that's lost, but the idea was quite unique, and it remains. The next project is Coolsingel, which is one of the most prominent promenades in Rotterdam. I'm sticking to Rotterdam because I can see these projects. I know what happened in these projects and how it, let's say, transformed. This is a shift from, so the first project was a station, the second our public space of a station, and the second project was the square, very typical landscape architecture project. And this can be half urban design, half landscape project, a street. And this is where most of our work is going to be in the future in landscape, I think, in a way, to change the street's profile to make it more human. This was what it was before. Very wide, important lane. The Stadhuis, this is like the city house is located here. There were some important buildings like the post office building, and a lot of shops, and it was the most prominent lane of Rotterdam crossing into the Maas. It became very, let's say, auto based, very heavy on car infrastructure, and very little space for cyclists. And a lot of course, the profile itself was designed long back that it was very public, but we saw that there's potential for more green, more pedestrian, and more non-auto based transport. And it is reducing anyways, so we just have to deal with it for the future. So instead of 2x2 lanes, we just push it into two sides, on 2 lanes on one side and 1 on the other side. They drive the other way around. So you have to, so this is going forward. So, and then the tram stays, of course, in the same position, but you add green over there, you add trees, helps the heat. You move the cycle into this road and make it a very prominent, big lane. And this led to this. It just finished a few months ago, 3 months ago or something like that. It's been going on for 5 years. And yeah, this is how it looks now. It's the other interesting thing we designed in them, and in every one of West 8 project, there's always a little detail that we do that's interesting or unique. And in this, it was the Coolsingel lights. It was based off of something also, which I don't have an image of, sadly, but on the other side, Starred House had very circular light, not similar, but this is a modern interpretation of this. Here I was involved a little bit in doing the details for some days, but yeah, this is the earliest project I have, and this also started like 7 years ago. And that's another thing about landscape projects. It's not like architecture where you build a building and it's done. It takes a long time to finish. So it's not something that you see on your eye every day. It takes, especially urban design projects, go on for years. Governor's Island is, so then I try to take a shift to more non-Rotterdam based projects. Governor's Island was started also in around 2008, and this was a old military base for the US military, and they were moving out, seeing less functions in them. And then the idea was to create a park for the residents of New York when they want to take a day off, come and roam around the island and enjoy various activities. And kind of our concept image was to say that, you can do this, that, and there's going to be so much to do. You're going to be so satisfied to make a day out of it. There's various layers to it. I think that's another important part of landscape, studying it through various kind of strata that work on it. There's a little fountain. There's so many little details through the, I mean, in a project of this size, 130 hectares or something like that, there are so many little details that you need to design. And the idea also was that these hills were made from the demolished, or at least the base, part of the base of the hills were made from the demolished concrete from some of the buildings that used to exist there. So it's not like you're bringing a lot of soil and putting it in there, but you're kind of working with the existing condition. And here there are some projects I'm not going to go into because I also don't have the clear story of it. I didn't work on it. I don't see it all the time. But I know that these are also big projects that, well, what you could do is try to see the pictures and try to see where the layers are and why it happened so. And so I think that's for example, New Holland, and you can just go to any of the new landscape projects by any firm and try to read the project to understand why is it more than just trees and gardens. There's a waterfront park in Shanghai. This is a big park in Utrecht that is that's also, let's say, the size of and I'm trying to compare it with something in Mysore to get the idea, but 2 times Kukrali or something like that, maybe 3 times, and then with a lot of various things happening, pavilions, activities. Here's another project that I can that you can see, and you're like, what does one do as a design? So here's another chance for me to kind of give you an idea of what exactly is happening here. When you see it, you see like, this is all like God made or like naturally existing design, but this is all man-made and designed by engineers and Westate. And it's very difficult to like imagine a space like this. And sometimes you see a landscape project and you're not sure. You have to see you have to see the maps, you have to see historical information. And here, so what happened was, in this part of Netherlands, well, let's say the whole of Netherlands has a coastline. Maybe I show with a dunes coastline on the left, on its west coast. Best seen on satellite, yeah. So let's this is Rotterdam. Let's switch off the layers. This is Rotterdam, and this is Den Haag, and Amsterdam is somewhere here. And as you go along, you see this dune coastline. This is also dunes. Here it's a bit, here the city has come into it, but you can see it almost everywhere. And you can read the landscape even on Google Maps. So this is a very different landscape than this. And it's almost immediate. And this is a very different landscape than this because of the lines. But of course, there's another story, and I'm not going to go into it. But when you pass along, you notice that it's mostly a connected dunes, and these dunes protect Netherlands from being underwater, because you can't see it, but from at this point, let's say this is the lowest point in Netherlands near a town called Gouda, and we are here is 7 meters below this level, so the sea is higher by 7 meters than this town. So all it needs at any point is the water to come in, and the dunes are a natural formation that protects Netherlands against it. But what happened was, I think you can notice it here. At this point to this point here, you can see. So I'll try to show it properly. Look, when you look here, this is a dune landscape. You can notice it in the map, and you can notice it here. But there was a gap here, and that just existed from before. So there was, and also this was an existing, so they had to build a dike to protect water not coming in. And this dike was every 5 years or 6 years, they increased the height of, about 15 years, I think, they increased the height of the dike by half a meter or 20 centimeter, 30 centimeter to come up with a new capacity of climate change protection requirements. And each time they go up, it just adds more height. So you're in a wall. Let me see if I can get a street view. I don't think so. Unfortunately not. Maybe there's something behind. Yeah, that's strange. There you go. Let's see it. So that's the dike. And basically behind it, you're under this different landscape, and on the other side is the sea. And you're always, this is the view of Netherlands most of the time. You never see the sea, and this keeps going up to protect against this horrible future we have coming up. So, so that basically, instead of doing this, the idea of the state was that we create a dune park, and I mean that's already the natural situation of most of Netherlands. Why not do it here? In engineering terms, instead of going up, you go sideways, and you could remove this amount of dike, and instead add sand. And the method of adding sand is also fascinating. They come with ships that throw sand into the water here, which blows with the wind and just lands on the dike and forms dunes over a many years. And the advantage of this very bad image, but advantage of this is that you create ecology, you create various recreational areas, you create activity, and it's more layers than just a dike. And so the dike now continues from the old dunes to the other much smaller ones, but they continue. This is one of those projects, and so that is Houndbosch Tunnel. And the last one I think I have is Madrid Rio, which is a river landscape, that a river waterfront that was transformed in 2006, I think. It's quite an easy to read design, but you just need to look at before and after. So there was heavy infrastructure going along the streets. Most cities have streets next to the river, because at that point of time in 1950s, the thinking was roads and cars, and let's make big traffic, and let's make easily accessible. And along the water was an easy accessible straight line to wherever you're going. For West 8, that meant this was not going to happen, and that we would remove the road. Where would the road go? Underneath. And this was a whole, I can imagine, was a very big and difficult project, an expensive project. But the mayor, the government, everyone was on West 8's side, because it led to a better city, and also it led to good votes for them. So there has to be thinking. But then basically the road went under here, somewhere under here. And then we created a park for various kinds of park throughout the whole length of Madrid along the water. And so there's various experiences, and the number of drawings are unimaginable, is what I've heard. I've seen some of them, but I'm not. There's various kind of spaces, cycling paths, and these bridges are very nice elements. And there's always a little architectural element in West 8. And for example, this one is one of them. It's a very beautifully designed concrete bridge. And I think the architectural support and materiality of it is really nice. It's just a beautiful bridge. And then there's one more project but that was basically Madrid Rio and how it changed. And then Toronto, we're doing the waterfront along Toronto in different ways, different parts. And right now here you see a wave deck, which is another kind of a state innovation of creating a deck, but with waves in it, that allows these little niches of activities and interest in the space. And the idea is to replicate the waves. It's quite simple, but it's quite a nice design. And there are many of them. If you go to Toronto, now this is big Toronto. Yeah, so we're doing this stretch, let's say from here to here, and there's a lot of these little docks. Previously used to be shipping docks, I think, ship docks. And then almost in every one of them, we're doing a wave deck. Here's one, here's one, here's one. And the last one which you saw was the render. I think they're trying to change, and now we're trying to change this one from parking to, and then there's one more here. The latest, this was released a few months ago. That's one more wave deck with various kinds of things happening in them. And a last image to leave you is a botanic garden in Houston. It's also built, but I just love the render quality of this. Thank you. I'm going to stop share, or well, if there's doubt, so I keep it on. But that's my presentation.
Thank you, Aditya. That was a very interesting presentation. Like, with a lot of things covered in about landscape and urban design. What was very interesting, I think, was the number of collaborators, or the stakeholders that actually contribute to making one design in landscape. Which is something that probably is lacking back here. So the contribution, even if it happens, it's probably with very minimal collaboration with the other stakeholders, who are supposed to be collaborating in a landscape project.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a very interesting project. Just would like to open the floor for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions to ask.
I'm going to stop sharing. I can always go back to some slide. But I think that's just generally how it, like right now I'm working on a project where there are so many architects and so many developers. It's just always fun, but it also happens in India, I think. It's just
more. It happens in India also. Not to the extent that it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's picking up right now. In India also, it's picking up in a lot of places, especially in these really large urban scale projects.
Yeah.
It is picking up. Yes. Ma'am, you would like to say something?
Yeah. Aditya, I joined in your presentation somewhere in between. Okay. But I was very happy to see that your projects are peppered all over the world. Yeah. So that is nice, because I think culturally, geographically, and geology, everything, the site in which your project is makes a lot of difference, and that way I think it would have given you a lot of exposure to even the cultural aspects of different places. With regard to this, do you have any experience to share? Because of the way it was situated, the place it was situated in, were there some decisions that had to be changed or altered, or something that worked very well because it was in China and not in Nigeria, something like that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the points. One of the points our director told me when we were, for example, now we're we had a project in India, or we had a tender in India, and we won the tender, and when we made a presentation for it, it's still it's not happening in Corona, nothing is happening, but when we applied for the tender, it was very important to when we were designing. It was in Gujarat. It was in the near Daman. No, not near. A little bit near Jamnagar. There was this old port, and kind of they want to make a marine national park. And when we were providing an idea of what as the state could do, it was very important to show references or show ideas of how we would do designs which were very related to the materials that existed around it, or had an effect on the design. And for we did one project in Colombia in it's called Rio Cali. Let me see if I have an image of it. And the bricks was another. So even sourcing the bricks was. Yeah, I have one image, and it was very important to adapt and change according to the design that was happening. I'm going to share my screen. This was Rio Cali, and it existed. It's a rough-edged street, and the interesting thing was, even what I heard was one story where there's one section that was taken over by this whole little gang, and to accept them into the design, like to allow them into, they were not moving out, and Colombia was like, these guys were little mafia that just controlled this part of the park. And there's also like Madrid Rio, where the river would continue on, and so basically they had to supposedly talk with these guys and offer them a little cafe and design this little space for them. And then the bikers were part of this thing, and they were like, yeah, let's you build here, we help you, if you want to take care of some people and move them out of them, we help you in it. And so it really adapts per place, I think. Of course, at the same time, you do see generalization, but the idea with the specifics comes in through materials and also elements. So we try to get in the projects in Rotterdam. You saw the elements of the light, and they all come from somewhere nearby, or the idea comes from somewhere nearby. So that's how we try to stay local while going international.
That's interesting. How you, like Seema was mentioning, all the stakeholders. If somebody is against the whole project for a reason, how you try and negotiate and involve them also, so that now they are part of the team and they come on the other side. They're not on the opposing side, but they come on your side. That's an interesting thing.
I think that really changes per place also. Netherlands is very democratic, but at the same time, you could have people, and in I think it's more difficult in a democratic country than in a non, because then you have more rights to each thing.
Correct. Yeah. The other thing that one notices is with passage of time, the approach of any landscape architecture firm or landscape architect has to be more driven by ecological processes than just understanding of ecological processes than just a cosmetic or something just on the surface sort of an approach. So did you what is your thought on this?
Yeah, I think for example, in the Hornbosch Duinen, the one with the dunes, the landscape comes from understanding the layers that exist, the kind of what happened before, what happened below in the soil, and what's the various over time, what has happened in terms of soil activity, the plants that grow,
actually the dunes and dikes thing, whatever you said, the image was not very clear, but it took me back to Ian McCulloch's theory of how land was formed and those different layers and all that. So that sort of an understanding, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah, I think
all approaches are like that now.
Yeah, no, that's almost essential now.
Yeah.
I don't think I will be honest. Weststate is not sustainable design. They don't go for like let's make the world a better place, more ecological place, but what they do focus is on where it comes from, and that makes it naturally ecological. So they don't go like, let's add solar panels just to make it, put this checklist on there, but rather to just study and understand where this land comes from, and that helps to just do a better design that benefits more users. Because also I think the idea of landscape till now has been about the human user, but there are so many more users coming up, and there are animals and birds and species, various species. So if that's the next, that's where the mind is opening up to now in most landscape architects, that we are not, back then, I think the historical Renaissance landscape was like this, this idea of this image of this person lying on the grass, eating grapes from someone putting grapes in their mouth and enjoying this view. But right now it's both of it's not it's also the animals that enjoy it as equally as we should.
Yeah. Okay, Aditya, thanks a lot for sparing time and making up, putting up this presentation together. Has anyone asked any question? No? No, I don't see any questions. Okay. Thanks a lot for taking time off. I think you've woken up early also to speak to us. Thank you. It was really good to see. Our students have been reading about some firms and then downloading and all that. But when it comes from someone who's working in a firm that has actually done it, I think it sort of reinforces what they have seen. And thanks to you and also to Westate for that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I could present, and if anyone has doubts, they can always about anything about landscape, they can always approach, get me. I think maybe on any of the social medias or something. So you just can reach out to ask me questions later.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe once they can talk to you, we can do a session on doing a master's in landscape architecture or urban design or something like that sort of a thing. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.